Behind the calm exterior of a businessman hid one of the outfit's most efficient killers. Phil Alderisio, known as Milwaukee Phil, he balanced the books by day and he settled scores by night. His legend was built not on chaos, but on a cold, calculated precision. He was an enforcer, bagman, burglar, and finally, for a brief moment, at his twilight, boss. Welcome back to James on the Mob. I'm James Jenkins, your host and narrator. In this episode, as I promised you earlier, we dive into the dual life of Milwaukee Phil, the accountant of death who left his mark on Chicago's underworld. Alderisio was a man who was a bridge between two distinct eras of the Chicago outfit. He began as a product of the old world, a street-level enforcer in the mold of the old Capone gangs, where brutality was the primary currency. Yet, he evolved into a modern mob executive, a man who could oversee a diverse portfolio of nightclubs, fraudulent loan associations, and sophisticated burglary rings, with the same cold calculation he applied to torture and murder. On September 25, 1971, a 59-year-old inmate named Felix Alderisio died of natural causes at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. It was a quiet, almost bureaucratic end, the kind of death that rarely merits a headline. But this was no ordinary prisoner. This was Felix Milwaukee Phil Alderisio, a man whose life was a masterclass in brutality. He was an enforcer, a bagman, a burglar, and one of the Chicago outfit's most prolific hitmen, suspected in at least 13 murders. For decades, Alderisio moved through the American underworld like a phantom, a creature of violence who rose to become the acting boss of the most powerful criminal organization in the country. His name is listed among the most infamous mobsters who died in prison custody, a fate shared by men like Vito Genovese, John Gotti, and a contemporary of his, Joey the Clown Lombardo. Yet the circumstances of his death tell a deeper story. A man who lived by the gun and the garrote did not die in a hail of bullets or in the trunk of a car. He died in a prison bed. This outcome was not an accident, nor was it a sign of failure for the men who hunted him. In fact, it was the ultimate symbol of victory for a new kind of law enforcement. Alderisio's quiet, anticlimactic end represented the triumph of a relentless federal strategy of attrition. The era when the mob bosses could rule with impunity and die on their own terms was being systematically dismantled, replaced by an age of legal and bureaucratic defeat. The FBI, through its top hoodlum program, had determined it didn't need to kill men like Alderisio, it just needed to outlast them. This is the story of the man they called Milwaukee Phil, and the long war that finally brought him to ground. The story of one of Chicago's most notorious gangsters begins not in the Windy City, but in Yonkers, New York. Felix Anthony Alderisio was born there on April 26, 1912. This simple fact of geography immediately complicates the narrative of a man who would become known to the world as Milwaukee Phil. The origins of that moniker lay far in his future, tied not to his birthplace, but to the territory he would one day command. As a teenager, Alderisio was swept up in the mythology of the Prohibition era. The real power he saw was not in New York, but in Chicago, where Al Capone's outfit had turned the city into a criminal empire. Drawn to this epicenter of crime, the young Alderisio made his way to Chicago and began a peculiar ritual. He would frequently wait outside Capone's headquarters at the Lexington Hotel, a hopeful outsider loitering with the singular ambition of getting a job, any job, as a messenger for the most dangerous man in America. One of his earliest arrests was for vagrancy, a testament to his persistent, almost obsessive presence on the fringes of power. Alderisio's patience eventually paid off. In the early 1930s, his maternal cousin, a connected man named Louis Lou Fratto, provided him with his long-awaited entry into the Chicago outfit. He was not brought in for his intellect or charm. He was brought in for his capacity for violence. The Great Depression had settled over the country, and in the brutal economics of the underworld, muscle was a valuable commodity. Alderisio was put to work as an enforcer, a role he was born to play. He joined a crew of future outfit luminaries, including Sam Teets Battaglia and John Marshall Caifano. In this company, Alderisio quickly distinguished himself, rising through the ranks by building a reputation for unhesitating brutality. He was dependable, efficient, and utterly ruthless, the perfect tool for an organization that maintained its power through fear. By the end of the 1930s, the outfit's leadership recognized that Alderisio was more than just a thug. He was trusted with a task far more sensitive and critical to the organization's survival than simple enforcement. He began working directly under the legendary Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, the outfit's financial genius and political fixer. Under Guzik's tutelage, Alderisio became a bagman. His new job was to deliver the cash payoffs that kept the machinery of the city running smoothly for the mob. He carried bribes to Chicago judges, police officials, and politicians, ensuring that the outfit's vast criminal enterprises were shielded from the law. This role gave him an intimate first-hand education in the systemic corruption that allowed organized crime to flourish, a pervasive influence that touched nearly every aspect of Chicago life and government. This dual apprenticeship, learning both the street-level application of violence and the high-level management of corruption, made Alderisio exceptionally valuable. Most mobsters specialize in one trade or the other. Alderisio, however, became proficient in both. He understood the entire criminal ecosystem, from how to break a man's legs to how to bribe the judge who would later hear the case. This unique and versatile skill set was the foundation for his inexorable rise to the highest echelons of the Chicago outfit. Throughout the 1940s, Alderisio continued his duties of bagman while learning the system and participating in hits. However, the 1950s saw Felix Alderisio forge the most infamous partnership of his criminal career. He was paired with another of the outfit's premier killers, Charles Chucky the Typewriter Nicoletti, a man who had killed his own father when he was 12 years old. Together, they became the organization's go-to wet work team, a duo so proficient and feared that their names were spoken in whispers. By the latter half of the decade, Alderisio and Nicoletti were widely regarded as the most dangerous triggermen in Chicago. They frequently teamed up for hits, their combined reputation for cold-blooded efficiency making them a subject of intense focus for both the FBI and the Chicago police. They were the physical embodiment of the outfit's ultimate sanction, the men called upon when a problem required a permanent solution. Alderisio and Nicoletti elevated their deadly craft with a piece of custom engineering that became legendary in law enforcement circles, the Hitmobile. On the night of May 2nd, 1962, police officers on patrol pulled over a suspicious black car. Inside, they found Alderisio and Nicoletti. This was no ordinary vehicle. It had been expertly modified for the specific purpose of carrying out assassinations and evading capture. It was equipped with special switches that allowed the driver to independently control the headlights and the taillights, making it possible to disappear into the night. In the back, a hidden compartment was revealed, complete with custom-made clamps designed to securely hold an arsenal of shotguns, rifles, and pistols. When questioned by the police about their heavily armed, customized vehicle, the two hitmen calmly replied that they were simply waiting for a friend. In a stunning display of the outfit's power and their own brazen confidence, they were released without charges. In 1962, Alderisio and Nicoletti took part in a crime so savage it would become a cornerstone of their terrifying legend. Along with a young, ambitious enforcer named Tony the Ant Spilotro, they kidnapped a 24-year-old thug named Billy McCarthy. McCarthy had made a fatal mistake. He and an accomplice had murdered two outfit associates. The crew's job was to learn the name of that accomplice. What followed was an act of medieval barbarism. To extract the information, Spilotro placed McCarthy's head into a heavy industrial vise and began to tighten it. As the pressure mounted, McCarthy's eye popped completely out of its socket. At that moment, he gave up the name of his partner, Jimmy Miraglia. Having served his purpose, McCarthy and his accomplice were both promptly killed. Years later, Tony Spilatro would recount the story, noting with a kind of professional admiration the unnerving calm of his colleagues. He was particularly impressed with Charles Nicoletti, who during the gruesome torture was casually eating a plate of pasta. And for more on Charles Nicoletti, I invite you to watch this previous video covering the life of the outfit's Iceman. One of Alderisio's most audacious ventures was a crew of elite cat burglars that he personally directed. Their specialty was rare gems and high-end jewelry. In a move of stunning arrogance, Alderisio for a time took up residence in Chicago's exclusive Gold Coast district. His unsuspecting, wealthy neighbors became his primary targets. While he exchanged pleasantries with them in the elevator, his crew was planning to plunder their homes. The stolen goods were then funneled into a closed-loop system fenced through a network of jewelry stores and wholesalers controlled by the outfit, ensuring maximum profit and minimum risk. Alderisio's business acumen extended across a wide range of industries. He owned or held interests in numerous legitimate and semi-legitimate businesses that served both as revenue streams and fronts for laundering the illicit cash. His holdings included several restaurants, meatpacking firms, small hotels, and a string of Rush Street nightclubs, bordellos, and striptease joints. Alongside these ventures, he was a major player in the outfit's loan sharking operations, providing high-interest juice loans to desperate individuals and businesses. He also delved into more sophisticated white-collar crime, becoming entangled in complex financial fraud schemes. This diverse portfolio demonstrates a criminal who was equally comfortable with a lead pipe as he was a balance sheet. For years, the source of Alderisio's nickname, Milwaukee Phil, remained a mystery. He wasn't from Wisconsin, so the moniker was not geographical. The truth, when it emerged, revealed a great deal about the power dynamics of the American Mafia. The nickname was not a casual identifier, it was a de facto title, one that signified dominion. Alderisio maintained a very close relationship with Frank Ballistrieri, the powerful and autocratic boss of the Milwaukee crime family. This was not a partnership of equals. The Chicago outfit viewed the Milwaukee family as a vassal state, and Alderisio was Chicago's appointed governor. His backing was the sole reason Ballistrieri could rule with an iron fist, as Alderisio's protection insulated him from any potential insurrection from within his own ranks. An FBI surveillance report from June 1968 provides a vivid snapshot of this hierarchy. Agents documented Frank Ballistrieri traveling to Chicago to meet with Alderisio at one of his businesses. After the Milwaukee boss departed, a bugged Alderisio was heard boasting to an associate that he had a deep in with the Milwaukee crew and that he could get anything he wanted from them. The nickname Milwaukee Phil was therefore a constant and public reminder to everyone in both cities of where the real power lay. It was a brand that broadcasted his specific sphere of influence within the outfit's sprawling empire. Alderisio's effectiveness and loyalty did not go unnoticed. In 1962, he was formally elevated to the position of underboss after the death of underboss Frank Strongy Ferraro, serving as the right-hand man to the face of the Chicago outfit, Sam Momo Giancana. This era marked a strategic shift in the outfit's leadership. The true powers, Paul the Waiter-Rica and Tony Accardo, had decided to step back from the day-to-day spotlight. In the mid-1950s, they promoted the brash and flamboyant Giancana to be the front boss. Giancana's job was to be a lightning rod to attract all the attention from the press and law enforcement. With his high-profile lifestyle, celebrity affairs, and political dealings, while Rica and Accardo continued to pull the strings from the shadows. In this arrangement, Alderisio played a critical, if less visible, role. He was a key member of Giancana's inner circle, the enforcer, who ensured the boss's orders were carried out and the organization's violent discipline was maintained. This structure was a deliberate and brilliant division of labor. Giancana's public profile, which included everything from alleged plots against Fidel Castro to ties with the Kennedy family, created a massive diversion. This allowed Alderisio, his functional opposite, to operate in the darkness. He was the shadow operator, managing the outfit's core functions, the hits, the intimidation, the loan sharking, the burglaries, with brutal efficiency. While Giancana shone brightly and attracted all the heat, Alderisio was the dark matter of the Giancana era, invisible but essential, his gravitational pull holding the violent enterprise together. By the mid-1960s, Sam Giancana's flamboyant leadership had become a liability. His high-profile antics and the intense federal heat he attracted had caused turmoil within the outfit. The old guard, Rica and Ricardo, orchestrated his ouster, and Giancana fled to a self-imposed exile in Mexico. In the ensuing power vacuum, the organization needed a steady, ruthless hand to restore order. In 1967, Felix Alderisio reached the pinnacle of his criminal career. He was named the new acting boss of the Chicago outfit. Alongside the semi-retired Rica and Ricardo, he acted as a caretaker for the Chicago family, tasked with reasserting control and lowering the organization's public profile. But in stepping out of the shadows and taking the top spot, Alderisio painted a target on his own back. He was now the number one objective for the federal government. His reign would be short, and it would end in a federal courtroom. The final years of Alderisio's freedom and life can be understood as a relentless personal battle between the new outfit boss and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a conflict personified by one man, Special Agent William F. Romer Jr. Romer was a veteran of the FBI's Chicago office and a key operative in J. Edgar Hoover's Top Hoodlum program, a strategic initiative designed to dismantle the mafia's leadership through constant invasive surveillance. Romer and his squad made Alderisio their primary focus. The FBI dedicated immense resources to his destruction, employing round-the-clock surveillance and sophisticated electronic monitoring. For over 2 years, they secretly recorded his conversations, compiling thousands of pages of transcripts known as logs, and detailed inter-office memoranda called airtels. The net was closing, woven from Alderisio's own words, captured on magnetic tape by an enemy he could not see. The case that would ultimately define Alderisio's downfall began not in Chicago, but in Denver, Colorado. In 1965, he was convicted of conspiracy to transmit murderous threats in interstate commerce, stemming from an attempt to extort $65,000 from a California businessman. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in federal prison, but the case was far from over. During the appeals process, Alderisio's lawyers made a stunning discovery. The FBI had illegally placed electronic bugs in his Chicago business premises and had been monitoring his conversations for years. This revelation transformed a standard extortion case into a landmark constitutional battle. The case, under the name Alderman v. United States, went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in a historic 1969 ruling, the court declared that the government was required to turn over all material gathered from illegal electronic surveillance to a defendant. This decision was a major blow to the Justice Department, forcing it to choose between revealing its secret methods and sources or dropping cases against top mobsters. While the Supreme Court case raged on, the FBI was not done with him. On Sunday, July 27, 1969, federal agents led by William Romer descended on Alderisio's suburban home in Riverside, Illinois. They arrested the 57-year-old mob boss just as his various capos and soldiers were arriving for a meeting. The charge this time was conspiring to defraud a bank in a scheme that had netted approximately $89,000. The photograph from that day is a powerful historical document. It captures the definitive end of Felix Alderisio's career on the streets, not with a bang, but with the quiet click of handcuffs. It was the visual culmination of the FBI's long, obsessive, and ultimately successful campaign to cage one of the outfit's most dangerous ghosts. Felix Alderisio completed the full arc of the American gangster mythos, rising from an ambitious teenager loitering outside a hotel to the absolute boss of a criminal empire. But in the end, he could not outrun a federal government that had modernized its own tactics, trading Tommy guns for wiretaps and grand juries. His legacy is one of calculated violence and shrewd criminal enterprise, but it is also a testament to his ultimate failure to adapt to a world where the greatest threat was no longer a rival gangster, but a patiently compiled federal indictment. After his death in 1971, his final resting place came to be Queen of Heaven Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois, a vast necropolis that serves as the final gathering place for generations of Chicago mobsters. There, among his friends and enemies, lies the man from Yonkers who became the ghost in the outfit machine. His violent life and quiet death, a final crucial chapter in the long, bloody history of American organized crime. So goes the story of Felix Alderisio. Felix Milwaukee Phil Alderisio rose from a small-time hustler hanging around the Lexington Hotel to one of the Chicago outfit's most feared enforcers. A man whose cold precision and ruthless efficiency defined the syndicate's muscle in the post-Capone era. Partnered with Charles Chucky Nicoletti, he became the backbone of countless outfit operations, from loan sharking to labor rackets, enforcing loyalty with quiet brutality. Yet as the years wore on, FBI pressure and internal distrust eroded the empire he helped build. By the time he died behind bars in 1971, Alderisio's reign had ended, but his legend endured, a stark reminder that in the world of organized crime, power is always borrowed and the debt always comes due. And in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on Milwaukee Phil or who you'd like me to cover in future videos. I'm James Jenkins. If you've enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Hit that like thumb, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned for the next episode of James on the Model. And remember, life is short, so don't whack it off. See yous.